Welcome to the SSI Orbit podcast, a forum that explores everything pertinent to digital trust. And I'm your host, Mathieu Claude. Okay, so as we go through the Bhutan NDI project, quite an ambitious project that you took up and actually launched very recently, so that's quite exciting and congratulations on that. Throughout the conversation, I kind of want to take a broader lens than just technology, as I think in this space, obviously technology is important, but being able to look at the business and the legal side of things is ever more important to enabling these cool technologies to work well. So we'll get into legal, we'll get into business, and I would like to finish the conversation with technology, but maybe before even getting into any of these things, I would love to know what the overall goals of the project were and how they kind of tie into the specific context of the country of Bhutan and the people of Bhutan.
Right. Thank you so much for having us. Firstly, we're so excited to be here. To get started, I'll just give a brief background to how the project was initiated. So it is actually rooted in a digital flagship program that we call Digital Drukgyal Flagship Program, which was initiated by then Ministry of Information and Communication, and then later on taken over by Government Technology Agency, GovTech Agency Bhutan. And then when the Digital Drukgyal Flagship Program got initiated, the idea was to provide equitable access to public services to all citizens residing in all parts of the country. And there are many rural residents in Bhutan who are either living in far off, it's difficult to get to those places and the terrain is very rugged. So the idea was basically steeped on that. And then, but then it was after they launched the program and did a few surveys to see how things were going and to get feedback from actual users of those e-gov services that were provided through the Digital Drukgyal Flagship Program. It was found that, there's like a trust layer missing. And while we do have a very unified sort of an identity system in place, but the portals and platforms through which citizens access these services were very fragmented. After we found that out, and I think it was, it was initiated by His Majesty the King, who, wanted to provide that a trusted digital ecosystem, but at the same time providing citizens with the right to privacy, and it all stemmed from there. So the Digital Drukgyal Flagship Program goes back to 2004, and now, of course, we are at 2023. So, and the first 2.5 years of the Digital Identity Project was basically, about getting the research done, getting the ecosystem ready, having conversations around should we go with a centralized model via a decentralized model. So, and then we just worked, from the ground up.
I guess just a comment, it's very interesting that the decision was made to give opportunities to the population of Bhutan, especially folks that are living in rural areas that may have tougher time accessing different services. So the whole question of accessibility is quite interesting as well.
So one of the main ideas of not just the Digital Drukgyal Flagship Program, but also the National Digital Identity Project is inclusion, not just in terms of accessing public services, but also, ensuring financial inclusion for the unbanked citizen. So, I do agree that it's very interesting that it's coming. It's a very unique place to, pilot a project like this, which is, it's an emerging technology, and the people are still grasping the concepts of privacy and digital accessibility and trust and things like that. And I don't think people in the rural parts even get these things. For them, user experience is the only thing that matters.
I think focusing like just off the bat, if it's like you're trying to achieve more financial inclusion, it's kind of it's a nice refreshing starting point versus just starting from like a digital identity starting point, which leads to a lot of confusion. But if you're focused on the user experience for a specific problem like this, then I guess you were later able to map what the solution would be for this, which kind of leads me to my next question, which if you look at other countries and their approaches at digital identity programs, and if we take Singapore as an example, they chose a very different architecture, different model than it seems Bhutan chose now that you've chosen the self-sovereign identity infrastructure for a whole country. So what was some of the research that was done, and maybe what led to choosing this more decentralized infrastructure for the whole country?
A good amount of our initial time was spent on doing the study and trying to understand, the different technologies and the types of solutions that are available in the market, and also which are some of the future-proof ideas or the systems that are going to remain, right? So with that, I think, and also like for Bhutan, we have such a unique setup. I mean, as obvious, Bhutan is a very small country with a very small population, and we did realize the benefit and the future-proof technology, basing it on the philosophy of SSI. So for us, I think it's not just I wouldn't put it as experimentation, but we were on. It was easier for us to at least go ahead, because at any point we could pivot. And even from our leaders, and especially from His Majesty, it has been that you have to try out, go out, and take risks. Although a managed and calculated risk, but unless you try out, unless you fail, you wouldn't know if it works or not. And we do have that advantage, and plus the support from the government and from the people. So I think those were some of the major contributing factors for us to take this journey.
And then I guess why, if we could go a little bit deeper into why the decentralized architecture, I think it's great just saying, let's take a risk, let's do something, we'll course correct if we need to. I think that's definitely the way to go. But why was a decentralized architecture chosen versus something like SingPass in Singapore, for example, that has a very robust set of use cases, very robust existing deployments, 99 point something percent of their population is on there, seems to be very interesting and working well. What was the draw to the decentralized approach?
I think one of the core concepts to drive decentralization was mainly, to provide citizens with the right to privacy, and then especially, the technology implementation with ZKP. I think that met that criteria, and like here Kumar mentioned, we could always retrace. So the idea was not just to ensure that there is a free-flowing digital ecosystem that is seamless and that ensures inclusion, but at the same time, now with the risks around personal data and your digital footprints and things like that, I think it was very much driven by by His Majesty's vision to provide citizens with the right to privacy. And throughout the project, we've been guided by his vision, wherein he has been involved and updated constantly with the measures that we've been taking and the implementation work that we are doing with Bhutan NDI.
So on a higher level, I think it was because as it aligns, it was about giving the control and ownership to people. I mean, although it is going to be a while until people warm up to the idea and then the concept about decentralized identity and SSI philosophy. But I think we are doing a good job in terms of sensitizing and then awareness programs and all. And I think at the end, it is about being all the while meeting the current needs about privacy and security. We also be future-proof, and also give control to the public.
That's great level setting. And so I mentioned at the start of the conversation that it's a lot more complicated than just getting the technology right to move these things forward. And there are business and legal lenses to look at. And perhaps starting with legal would be interesting, as that kind of is the enabler for any of this to happen. So you mentioned that there was already a drive to give privacy to citizens. Privacy as a concept is important as it was. Was this already baked in to law or legislation of Bhutan? And what needed to happen to incorporate some of this digital identity stuff into legislation in Bhutan? I think that's an area that just understanding firsthand experience here will be very helpful for anyone that is in countries looking to push these types of projects forward.
So, in fact, we do have an act, or the ICM Act of 2018, which actually was initiated, I think, around 2011, and it took a really long time for the act to even come into effect in 2018. But when we started doing the basic study and feasibility study and application level study, we realized that there is a huge gap in in terms of regulations and regulatory frameworks missing around digital privacy, or even just around the ecosystem of a digital ecosystem in Bhutan. So the idea which took off the NDI Act, the National Digital Identity Act of 2023, was to fill in that gap. So it does not precede, the Act does not precede the ICM Act of 2018, but it goes hand in hand and is complementary. It also references the ICM Act of 2018 in terms of electronic signatures and digital signatures and things like that. But the NDI Act is a lot more comprehensive. And while the Act has been kept, it's technology agnostic and does not really, specify the technology specifications as such, but there are like chapters on decentralized public key infrastructure and even concepts around digital guardianship and digital controllership and things like that, which makes the Act comprehensive and also speaks about decentralization and ensuring that citizens have ownership over their data and the right to privacy.
So I think the ICM Act was it is on a very broader level actually. So with the NDI Act, I think we have gone a bit more granular in sense, and especially in around privacy and security and personally identifiable information. So along those lines, it was kept on a broader level in ICM Act. So now with the coming in of NDI, I think it is also to be able to, because the current need of the hour, I think NDI Act actually addresses to those needs and requirements. So now more and more are like be it tourism or business or just casual visitors, or because Bhutan is opening up to internationally, right? So the commotion or the incoming of expats is growing, and so does the requirements on the digital ecosystem as well. So I think NDA Act addresses to that as well.
Just to provide you with context for that, Bhutan has been a very closed economy for the longest time, wherein we were closed off to, not to say that we did not have expats, but the numbers were limited, let's say. And now we are broadening that, and we are opening up the economy, not just to expats living in Bhutan and residing here and working in Bhutan, but also, at an individual level to digital service providers. So we are opening up even possibilities for FDI and digital services and even consultation services and things like that. So I think having, like my colleague mentioned, having a comprehensive act which encompasses a regulatory framework, even for these participants of the economy. I think that was really important.
How long did the whole process take from coming up with the different elements that would go into the National Digital Identity Act until the end of it? Like, what was, and then, so how long did the whole thing take? Were there road bumps or learnings that you could maybe provide out of that?
I believe that from the Parliament side and from the legal standpoint, the gap analysis and the study around, actually coming up with a National Digital Identity Act was had started simultaneously when we kicked off the project in terms of product development. And then, of course, there was a lot of knowledge sharing, and we established a stewardship kind of a relationship between the project team and the law implementation team, let's call it that. And then basically the idea was to make sure that the NDI Act is in touch with and relevant to the technology that is being developed, and both of them are not developed in silos. So, there was, which I think is a very good strategy that we took, because most of the times when laws are developed, the business developers or the product developers are kept outside of that conversation, but that was not the case here. And I think that really helped the act to be a lot more comprehensive. And then we also had consultants from around the world, like Drummond and Scott, who actually helped us ensure that not just the act itself, but even the governance framework and the technical documents and the technical requirements and things like that were in line with the global standards, and as well as aligned to the requirements nationally.
The actual passing of the act, I think, not to say, it was just passed easily, but as Pallavi mentioned, so from the inception itself, it has been a concurrent process, both from the development side and also at the governance side, technology and governance side equally. And even with the representatives on the government, also a lot of knowledge transfer, and also, even from the expertise, we, sat face to face with our representative from the government, so that they understand what is the need and why the act needs to come about. So I think those were really good decisions that we took as a project. And then also we always had blessings from His Majesty, and the context in Bhutan is such that people are really supportive of the government, and government also wholeheartedly, after all the sessions and all, they were on board, and I think so the process was seamless. But it was a challenge, of course, for us to really study and get an expertise, and we don't have really much of references at a national level to learn from the mistakes or the blockers or the challenges, right? And we had to rope in quite a few expertise and get their views. So it wasn't easy, but it went as we expected.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that obviously having the product development and the legislature moving in parallel and being able to feed off each other is fantastic. And it's also great to hear that outside of the team, there were outside contributors, independent contributors. The legislation wasn't just controlled by cabinet and parliament. There was collaboration there, and even on the product development and the governance around it, and how the law will get implemented or how the technology will support the law was also assisted by outside parties as well. What does the governance body look like for NDI? And it might be interesting to just talk about this public-private partnership, and then how you see this evolving as now this thing has gone live, and then how you'll want to, I guess, mature the governance over this whole program?
So the governance body, I think we have based it on the GOIP framework only. So there, I think that the terminology is a bit different. So, but we call it a governing body here. So there we do have a representative from GovTech, which is the technology steering body for the government. So any strategical or the future roadmaps and everything that happens through GovTech. So we have a representative from there, and we have a representative from the government, and we have a mandatory candidate from the individual general public, from the private sector. They can be from any industry, but they do need to have the domain knowledge. And we have segregated it entirely from the operation and NDI administrative body. So the administrative body would be responsible for the technology, innovation, and operation of NDI as a whole. But in terms of the legalities and the governance and all those stuff, it would be the governing body, which is independent.
Right. It is an ad hoc body, the governing body, which comes together and consists of, like Kumar mentioned, firstly, of the head of GovTech agency with the domain expertise. But then also, I think there's provision for having two independent individuals, again with domain expertise, and two members from the civil servants. So the governing body would consist of 5 members, 5 voting members, and I think we have one additional member who's probably, I think, comes from the NDI administrative body, and basically calls for the meet and acts like a speaker of sorts who, commences the meetings and calls for the meetings and ensures that acts like a bridge between the administrative body and the governing body.
I really like that. It's like almost like a company board of directors, which in that case would have oversight over management to ensure that they're meeting obligations or the interest of the shareholders of the company. But in this example, it's just the shareholders would be the citizens of Bhutan, and then ensuring that the mission is delivered, that they get the right to privacy, that there's financial inclusivity baked into the whole thing, there's more opportunity, more accessibility, and so forth. So once all of this structure was set up, so if we just move past the legal part and we go into the business part of things, how did you go thinking about different use cases, how to grow the ecosystem, how to involve different stakeholders, how to create a public-private industry partnership? So how do you move from, okay, we want to do this, we have core principles in mind, how do we actually execute this?
So there were a few points to consider. We considered a few points. So one was, since this is an emerging and new technology, then both the businesses or the service providers and the individual users, general public, need to understand and know how it all works and what it entails, right? And what are the benefits they are getting. So our objective, one of the objectives, is to sensitize. That other one is actually bringing, integrating, and then bringing in the benefits through integration. So we had strategized to go into levels. So level 1 would be the simplest one, just to be able to log in passwordlessly in some portals or any websites, and then avail the services, right? And level 2 would be, wherein you would get credentials and be able to onboard a KYC and those kind of things. And then as you go higher, then it would require a significant business process re-engineering, and therein by making the services more effective, and then also bringing in new innovative services to the people, right? So this is how we have strategized. And our approach right now, the initial entry point would be to start with a level 1. And we have conceptualized a sort of we call it a first story, where an individual would first get their foundational credential. Then after that, they would get their academic credential. And with that academic credential, they can go to an organization and then be able to, get a job. Where the employer would already be able to, request a proof from their wallet. And once that individual is employed there, then that individual will be able to get an employment credential in their wallet. And they would go to a bank, and with those credentials be able to open a bank account and ultimately receive their incentives or salaries in their bank account, right? So that has been the first story. So along those, we have already done level 1 integration with a number of citizen services, G2C services, and we have also integrated with Royal University of Bhutan, issues credentials for alumni or the graduates from the university. And we have DH Hydro Holding Investments Limited, who can issue employment credentials to their employees. And we have currently almost done with Bank of Bhutan, which is one of the oldest and important bank in the country. So there, people would be able to open a bank account and then also log in passwordlessly to their banking mobile app. And we have also telcos, where you can get your verifiable mobile numbers from those telcos also. Because as it happens that sometimes you get mobile number in somebody else's name, that person is already somewhere else, maybe out of the country, or doesn't know that that number exists on his name, and you would use that number to avail some other services, and therein comes the discrepancy, and it takes a lot of effort from the bank and the telcos themselves to sort out these things. So currently, yeah, those are the first use cases that we have covered, and our idea is to expand on that first story, to include more employers, more telcos, more financial institutions, and include all the G2C services, and and expand.
In terms of product design, like when we were discussing the initial use cases, the conversation largely revolved around not just providing a product where individuals can verify or authenticate themselves while accessing services, business and government, or just getting their credentials to prove themselves somewhere else, or to prove their banking, or I don't know, their telecommunications credentials somewhere else. But it was also to provide a solution for problems that exist in the country, which may be unique just to Bhutan. So we wanted to ensure that the concept of providing solution is incorporated in our product roadmap. So the idea to ensure the onboarding of telecommunication company and banking companies were to meet those problems that exist, like inaccessibility in terms of the terrain, or in terms of accessing financial services and things like that. And one of the key drivers was to provide KYC, to meet KYC mandates with Bhutan NDI. So the verifiable credential designs were driven by that problem. So the reason that we chose to add mobile numbers as a verifiable credential was so that the banks can meet the KYC requirement for having a person's mobile number as a verifiable credential. And of course, they also can add their current address as a self-attested credential, which is again, verifiable through the app. Of course, it's self-credential, because in Bhutan, we only have present address as a verifiable credential, which is issued by the Department of Civil Registration and Census. And there is no, it's very difficult to meet the current address requirement that KYC mandates. And even around anti-money laundering, AML and AFT, we wanted to meet some of those so that citizens can onboard remotely from wherever they are, and they don't have to travel far off distances just to open a bank account or to access financial services. There are a lot of unbanked citizens in the country. In terms of, I think, mobile penetration, we have, I think, almost close to 100 mobile penetration, but I don't think that's a smartphone penetration. And in terms of internet, in fact, I think after the pandemic, we saw a huge jump where internet penetration jumped from over 50% to somewhere over 85% just from 2020 to 2021. So which was, I think with the NDI coming in at the right time, I think inclusion has been such a driver for the project, and to be able to meet those problems that citizens face, and they can't really travel far off distances, even though they have access to the internet or they have access to mobile phones. I think that was really important and incorporated into product design and product roadmap.
In terms of inclusivity, I think we have extremes in number of domains, I would say, in the customer segment, right? So individuals who are tech savvy, people who don't know much about technology, or some educated people, and there are a significant number of people, especially at the older age spectrum, so illiterate people, and then also remotely people residing in the very remote areas. So we do have geographical challenges in terms of reaching out the infrastructure and connectivity and all those sorts of things. So there are challenges as well. So I think there are extremities in number of verticals in customer segments, and we are considering all of those and how we can achieve the maximum inclusivity for NDI.
Right. And even the Act, in fact, the NDI Act, keeping that in mind, I think has, there are specific provisions which talks, like I mentioned earlier, about digital guardianship and digital controllership. It is so that it is to ensure inclusion in the longer run for citizens who probably are incapable of controlling or taking custody of their Bhutan NDI wallet or their verifiable credentials.
I assume all of this is optional for citizens as well. That seems to be one of the biggest misconceptions throughout the world when people are unsure about digital ID. It just typically it's a complement to existing identity systems. That I'm assuming that's the case as well for Bhutan.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So from day one, I think our message has been that it is entirely optional. And of course, this is again, it comes as a gift from His Majesty. So it is free for general public and it is optional. So with the existing integration work also, whatever we have done so far, we have kept it like they can go the traditional way, or however it is, and then they can opt to get the service with Bhutan NDI. And so I think the attraction would be the advantage and the reduction in the time to avail certain services that Bhutan NDI would bring. And I think that would encourage people to adopt Bhutan NDI.
You talked about the levels, like having a few levels and categorizing use cases within these levels, Kumar, and you mentioned like complexity of business process perhaps being a measure how you would put use cases within certain levels. Maybe risk is involved in there as well. Could you maybe provide a little bit more context around how this categorization and this scoring, I don't know how deep it goes, but this whole exercise of creating these different levels to just help then categorize use cases to then decide, okay, we're going to start here, and then here's our roadmap moving forward once we execute on these first ones.
Yes, I think it loosely maps to the general principle, like, digitalization, and digital transformation, right? So whereby, first of all, you'd be as it is, whatever the business processes may be. So Bhutan NDI would just come in and then facilitate the first and foremost requirement, whereby you authenticate yourself so as to receive the services. And after that, then maybe perhaps that you can change the business processes itself, especially when it comes to financial institutes and all, right? But we haven't really, we haven't really made any metrics as such as to how you categorize with some sort of formula or like that. But it is a broad level understanding that if it is a simple integration whereby it involves just authentication and being able to access some services, then we call it level 1. And as the complexity increases, then we just it goes to higher level. And then also not only from the customer end, right? Because as we measure, even from the NDI perspective, then a lot of things are coming in our roadmap. So we have digital signature and CBDC and decentralized chat and committed messages and all those sort of features that would be coming in, and then we would have a number of value-added services and how we can align those or maybe incorporate those in the real world businesses so as to they can come up with innovative services for the consumers. So I think in terms of levels, I think so there is no definite hard and fast definition of these levels, but it's a broader understanding how we approach it.
I guess it does put some structure in place, which is helpful to just prioritize efforts. And then so we talked about this like foundational identity being that first piece. I'd be interested to understand what this credential looks like. Is it what government system of record is it based off of? Is it a digital representation of an existing ID card, or is it a new schema altogether? It'd be interesting to learn a bit more about that foundational piece, which I guess will allow your level 1 to log into a portal, access G2C services, and then it kind of spearheads the other use cases downstream.
Yeah, so I think first I think we need to talk about the schemas themselves, how we came about designing them. So initially with our technology partners, initially they had certain tools which helped us to, how to tackle it. And we studied how the current, what are the physical documents, or even if not physical, so what are the information or the attributes that is being passed around in the business, be it a government or financial institutes. For example, like when you say bank account, if I'm required to share my bank details to another party, what are the typical attributes they usually look into? So that is how we approach it. So our approach is that this is going to be dynamic. The schemas are going to change over time, right? So this is not going to be a fixed thing. So as and when we sort of left it, our idea is to leave it as an emergent thing. So which works the best down the line. So for this schema, these are the attributes that is more popular. This is more relevant to the businesses. So we want to leave it in that way, so that any integrating partner can adopt to that one. And for the foundational ID, we did base it for Bhutanese. We did base it from the census report that the government has, and from there we picked up the attributes that are most relevant or frequently required by the other business entities whenever you have to present your copy of your citizenship card to somebody else. So what are the things they especially focus into? Because in the process, you share everything, right? When you are sharing your photocopy of your citizenship ID card. But we made a point to visit those organizations personally, and then sit with their business people, and then what is their true objective behind what information do they want? What is the assertion there? So understanding those, then we have decided on the set of schemas for the foundational ID. So as it happens, NDI just basically maintains the system which we call the foundational ID issue, but the source of the data for the Bhutanese is the government, and for non-Bhutanese is another department which takes care of expats in the country. So as I said, the schema has been we have tried to go to the businesses and then see what are the common attributes that people look into, and then is it available with the government? Does the government maintain that? So it is not exact replica of the existing card.
You're mentioning just this collaboration with the private sector to be able to come up with these things, make sure that it suits their verification needs, has value for them today. Were there struggles in educating the private sector and getting buy-in from the private sector to say, hey, you're going to have to pick up a new infrastructure, you're going to have to install some new software, you're going to have to manage new sets of keys and stuff like that? It's the most difficult thing, is just pushing digital transformation objectives within an enterprise's roadmap, I guess. If we could talk a bit about just how you went about the education and then the collaboration with stakeholders, and were there any road bumps, any lessons learned of just working with private sector and saying, hey, you probably want to pick up this new thing?
I would say it's sort of a stick and carrot game, to be honest. So sometimes, because not all the organizations are same, so it includes, of course, private and corporations as well. So for some, our very first approach was to give a detailed understanding about the concept of SSI and decentralized identity, and that had been our first step. So even before we actually start engaging with them, we have a plan. We had planned and actively, managing our stakeholders. So early on, even if they were not in our immediate roadmap, but still we would reach out to them and then do an awareness program, and then talk to them about NDI and philosophy behind and how it works technically, so that they can wrap their heads around and then have enough time to grab the concept. So that has been our approach. Early on, we get to these organizations. And then as the integration happened, and there were challenges because at one end, they had legacy system and rigid business processes, which were already, so spread out and complex that you couldn't just, if you were to change one service, then it would impact all the rest of the services, right? So in that sense, it was complex and a bit difficult to change. So I guess that will take a really huge effort from our end as well, because we have to address all the other systems as well, because they are interdependent in an organization. So for a bigger organization, that was the case. And for some smaller organizations, I think it was understanding the concept did take some time. So for example, when you are issuing a physical card, it comes with an expiry date. And when you say that if you're getting from the wallet, then you would always get an up-to-date information from the wallet, where you wouldn't need an expiry date to maintain as an attribute, then they would have reservations in doing away with that particular attribute. I mean, a simple example. So I think sensitizing and rigidity of the existing business process and legacy systems, those are some of the main challenges.
In terms of integration, I think, though, I would say that it has been easier to onboard or integrate with business service providers, because it's easier to speak their language, and then like Kumar mentioned, like give them the carrot and just be like, this is how the product is going to, or the platform is going to simplify your business processes or make your customer experience better, or for that matter, even expand your customer base. So while they might not have been entirely forthcoming and excited, but once they started grasping the concepts, I think they were more, at least more than the public sector. The public sector, like you mentioned, was a lot more difficult because the legacy systems in the public sector is a lot more rigid, and it's very difficult to dismantle those, or like to re-engineer those. So that has been the case in the private sector. Surprisingly, so we have our lighthouse partners, some of which are actually business service providers, like those from the banking and telecommunication industries. So once with the launch, when we launched the product with our lighthouse partners, we've received a lot more interest from the private sector. Now we have, like, initially we had to go on to like each and every organization, conducting roadshows, explaining the concepts, and then speaking their language, showing explaining how the product would add value to their systems and to their business processes. But now at least things are changing a little bit, and the dynamics is changing a little bit, where in the private sectors, in private sector companies are reaching out to us and expressing interest, requesting for roadshows, and requesting for demos of our product. So that has been interesting. I would say that getting I think getting from level 1 use cases to level 2 use cases with the private sectors will not be as difficult as it will be with the public sector.
Yeah, so given it is just started, hasn't been much, so we are hopeful that it's going to change, because some of the concerns were along the lines of compliance as well. Because if you take financial institutes, there is a compliant a regulatory body for them. In the power industry, there is another regulatory body for them. So how it aligns with the NDI Act, and it would take some time for the businesses themselves also to understand properly. They do raise genuine questions about, how does it impact their compliances, and then they are reluctant, and that's understandable. And I think it is a bit early to really form a rigid, or rather more definite opinion about that one, because as it is just a start. So we are very hopeful that in the near future it is going to change.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes, once you get beyond just government issues, some foundational piece of identity, or at least like a high assurance personal identity to citizen based on whatever system of record, it starts to get consumed by the private sector. Eventually there becomes use cases that are interesting for private sector to be issuers of credentials. And we talked about one example here today being that verified phone number, which would come out of a telco as an issuer, and then could be consumed by a bank, for example, for KYC purposes. Are you seeing maybe not pushback, but like concern about the risk of being an issuer as a private sector entity? Because I assume that, like, through terms and conditions and limitations of liability, you could put some structure in place, but I always wonder if something goes wrong downstream and there's like wrong credential is issued, or it leads to something, like if there's a risk of reputation damage or stuff like that. Like, are you seeing any perceived like pushback, or are private sector potential issuers saying, hey, this is a whole new risk vector that we would be opening up if we do this?
Surprisingly, there wasn't actually pushback. And also we have to consider that we haven't really engaged with a huge number of private sectors yet. Right now, it's just one or two private sectors that we have engaged with at the moment. And I think it was mutual because for them also it has been an added effort because end of every periodically, or be it 3 months time or 6 months time, the banks or concerned financial institutions do send them a huge list of numbers for them to reconcile, and then give them the status and all those things. So it is an added effort for them as well to reconcile all those numbers and get the status of each of the numbers and then send it back to the bank. So that is an added effort for them as well. If we talk about that private telco industry. So right now there is no pushback as such, but on the risk factor, they did raise questions around what is going to be the implications down the line, how is it going to be handled, and we did mention that it covers the NDI Act, um, addresses those, and we have made a point that all the businesses or the transactions that is carried out via NDI, Bhutan NDI, are legitimate and admissible to the court. So I think that gave them assurance.
And like he mentioned, while we did observe some hesitancy from maybe some of the private sector companies, I think it's also, a risk versus potential benefits, right? So I think private sector companies, while maybe a little worried about, they don't really understand the technology, and it's a whole new system that they need to put in place, and they don't really have proof as to whether it works or not. I think there also is a factor of, maybe potentially being left behind because other service providers in their sector is, probably going to provide better customer service or have a better and seamless business processes within the company. So I think, I think it's about weighing those options, and they have expressed those. But we do get those questions like, okay, how many banks have you integrated with? How many banks are you in contact with, or initiated integration process with? So things like that. So I think there is that competitive edge that they hope to have with NDI.
As we move towards technology, I said I would leave that as last, as it's the least important piece in everything we're talking about here. But one of the core pieces of technology that enables all this to happen is wallet infrastructure in the use cases we're talking about for citizens to be able to hold their credentials and then have different types of exchanges and interactions. And down the line, as we're talking about potentially much more trust tasks, you've talked about messaging and payments and stuff like that. So it's the foundation for all of this. And maybe I kind of answered the question I'm about to ask with what I just said, but why was the decision made to build a wallet specifically for the citizens, so the Bhutan NDI wallet, versus going down the road of using an Apple Wallet or a Google Wallet that people already have on their mobile devices if they're smartphones?
I think that discussion would come in the near future. Maybe it's too early for us at the moment, because I think when you talk about Apple and other wallets that are already existing, then the question about interoperability comes in. Then I mean, although we have provisions and we have thought about it, and we need to go deeper into it and do some more studies along those lines as to what are the standards and all that we need to really, the specifications for that matter, that we need to incorporate. So we believe, I think that is a bit down the line in our map, interoperability. But I think the immediate thing was that, like as you mentioned, first of all, we need to reach out to people, and there is also a philosophical angle to it, because this comes as a gift from the government, from His Majesty. and people do tend to trust. And for us also to implement and then reach out to people when we have a wallet of our own. And in our roadmap for the wallet itself, we call it actually a mega wallet, because not just the identity and the credential that it holds, so we want to have value addition to that as well. And if we talk about third-party wallets, then a different set of questions and challenges would arise. And of course, we would get to them. But to start with, I think we sort of feel that it's better to start with our own wallet.
And even the conversation, the initial conversation began not from the perspective that citizens need to have a digital wallet, but rather citizens, we need to provide a safe and secure digital ecosystem. So that was the starting point for, the National Digital Identity project to take off. So yeah, I think the idea that we decided to design that national digital identity in the form of a wallet came at a later point. The goal was to ensure that the digital ecosystem is safe and secure, and of course it is the users have control over their data and over their privacy, and while at the same time ensuring there's digital trust. So I think that since that was the driving conversation, and then later on in terms of developing a wallet, it was more of a product design and a business decision. So I think because of that, we didn't really talk about Apple Wallet or any other third-party wallets to come in. Of course, they could come in and probably store driver's license and your boarding pass and I don't know, probably all sorts of credentials. But that is a product design call, and it's a business design call in terms of how much value we want to provide along with the digital identity, the foundational identity that you're getting. So it's I think balancing both a business decision as well as a public service capabilities, ensuring that the NDI wallet incorporates both of those.
How were different standards looked at? Like, did you have to take into consideration international standards? We talked a bit about the country opening up. There's already some expats, but there's going to be more visitors coming in. So how is this infrastructure going to need to be able to support different people coming in? Or are they just going to have to onboard onto this thing as you can get like a visitor's status credential type of thing? And then how were international standards looked at? And was it an important thing to say that, hey, we're going to have to be compatible with what's happening outside of our country?
So I think along those lines, from day one, our team, so we have different streams, work streams, as we call it. So they have been in touch with, individual contributors and international experts and all. So meeting up to the international standards, being able to the interoperability, having provision for the interoperability that has always been in the design process. And right now we may not have gone into details as to how you can meet each standards per se, but we have tried to make sure that we don't deviate from those standards. And we have kept an eye, and then we have referred to EIDS, and also GDPR, and also we have also invited, we are collaborating with some of the entities, even in Canada and other places, as to to collaborate and validate whether we are on the right track or in terms of standards and all. So those efforts are being put in place.
Right. And in terms of expats, I think for now, for an expat coming and residing in Bhutan, because without meeting the KYC mandates, they don't really get a permanent SIM card or a bank account. So we do onboard expats with their worker permit, which is issued by the Department of Immigration into the Bhutan NDI wallet. But I think going forward, we are also looking at the possibility of like providing it to visitors and tourists. For instance, like we are also in terms of interoperability and checking whether how it works and making sure that it is interoperable with other services and other service providers. We are also working. We have initiated the conversation with Digi Yatra, which is initiated by the Ministry of Civil Aviation in India. So this is for citizens and foreign nationals visiting India, and they can issue, it is mainly for contactless travel, and they can issue travel credential into the Digi Yatra, which basically translates into digital journey app. So, and then because Bhutan is accessible by air from India and even by land from India, mainly India is, the port that foreign nationals fly into, and even like Bangkok and Singapore, but India is one of the main ones. So we are looking at the possibility of having Digi Yatra issue travel credentials into the NDI wallet, just, to do some checks and balances around interoperability.
So even on the technology component wise, we are making sure that any component that we use, say for biometrics or before any other component, that it has to meet the global standards, or like NIST or other standards. So we are making sure that we adopt technology components, those which meet global standards.
It's amazing, like through good leadership and good goal setting and values for the population, all the way down to the structure you've set up and the oversight, the governance body, and everything. It's resulted in something very nice, and it's amazing to see Bhutan take a leadership role on the global scale of digital credentials, digital identity, really creating digital public goods for citizens as their lives are becoming more and more dependent, or could get better through using online mechanisms. These are important tools to enable for citizens. So I want to thank you both for doing this with me today. It was a very refreshing and amazing conversation, and congratulations on all the success, and look forward to doing another one of these once we're seeing adoption grow and there's maybe more learnings to share. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. We really
Thank you,
enjoyed the
Mathieu.
conversation.
I just want to put it that in Bhutan, it's just at a national level, I think it's just about like a big family sort of thing, the way things work, and being at the NDI project, I think for us, the mandate is always that you consider people not as a formality or just a business process. 2 + 2 is 4, that kind of thing. So lots of philosophical thing and emotional and all those sort of things. It's a very organic and dynamic community, and our effort is to how seamlessly to provide the benefit of a decentralized identity and the benefits that come with it in terms of privacy and security, and how to prep those communities which are a bit left behind to make them available and be able to partake in the current happenings in the digital ecosystem and also internationally. That is our effort. And thank you for giving us this platform, and thank you so very much.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed these conversations as much as I do. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on the platform of your choice to make sure you're notified of new episodes that may be of interest to you. If you're looking to connect, feel free to reach out directly to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Catch you all later.